In this video, I'm going to talk about carving, and I'm going to talk about the basics first and then get into a little bit more advanced things. And this is one of my favorite parts of the process. I think it's a lot of fun, and I hope you do too. Okay, so here I am set up to carve, and you'll notice I have something down in front of me. This is a bench hook, and it's kind of hard to show you in the camera here, but on both sets, one side has a piece of wood on top, and the other side has a piece of wood on the bottom, and this is designed to go on my table here. So it actually hooks on one side, and then it catches your plate on the other. And I used to never use these, but oh my gosh, these are incredible. And so now I don't have to hold my wood and carve at myself with the tool. You know, I can put it here and I can let the tool fall off of the board. And so just that can be really, really helpful. You can always spin your block if you need to. Some bench hooks have a little corner cut out, so you can do that. But I actually find that I do pretty well just being able to balance. The other thing people like to use, but I don't have an example of in front of me right now, is a some of that no slip kind of rug mat goes underneath rugs, and so it keeps your rug from slipping around. And just cutting off a piece of that and putting that down will really help. Avoid having your hand have to do all the work of holding a block of wood. And so, again, we're normally trying to carve away from our flesh, so we're not cutting ourselves. That's a pretty basic concept. And this is actually a drawing that I did during one of my recent classes, and so I've actually already transferred it. It was inspired by a scene in Lyon, and I'm doing the first layer here. It's kind of a darker layer, so I'm excited to see how this comes out. And I did the image is actually I don't do this often, but it's going to be smaller than the block of wood itself, and I'm going to have a border. And one of the reasons I made a border is because it's kind of hard, so I'm going to show you guys that. And so I do want to give people license to just draw with their tools. And so if you're starting out with a kind of, here's a beginner set, you'll find that it comes with two different u-gouges. And a u-gouge is basically a smiley face tool. You know, it's got a little curved piece of steel on the end. And this particular kit has two different sizes. It also comes with a v-gouge. Not all kits come with a v-gouge, but I do like using a v-gouge. It's handy from time to time, and a lot of people really love it. And then there's the good old chisel here, which when you look at it, you'll notice one side is beveled. This is the flat side, and then the other side has a bevel on the end, which just means an angle. And so one side is flat and one side is angled. It's important to keep that in mind. Oh wow, and this one has been incredibly chipped, so that needs to go over to the sharpening table. And then same thing with the knife. The knife has a flat side here, and I kind of think of that as the back side, but you have a flat side and then you have a beveled side. And again, that's an angled side to the knife. And so you have those two, and those do matter. You need to pay attention to that as you're using them. But a really, really basic way to carve, right, is just take your u-gouge and start drawing with it. And in this case, I've got a plastic tool. I'm pushing away from myself. You can use that bench hook to push your wood up against, and you can just draw. And you'll notice you don't always have, especially when you're like going slightly against the angle of the grain or something, you don't have the most control in the world. This tool kind of will wave around a little bit, but I'm going to carve this whole sky out, so I'm just going to show you, like, you know, I can just go in there and start drawing and making marks. And this is woodcut, right? This is what we're doing. We're making marks in the wood, and you know, that's going to print. Anything you take away is removing. And if you want, having a piece of graphite around is kind of fun, because you can actually rub that on there and you can see those marks that I made with the u-gouge. And so that is a really basic way to carve. And in this case, all I was doing was kind of outlining some areas that I was going to keep. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to coming around the bend here, outlining the border that I'm going to have there. What's also nice, as you could see with a bench hook, bench hooks are, I know McLean's has some, they're a common thing. And I make my own out of plywood, but you don't have to. And normally I use a smaller u-gouge to outline the work that I'm doing, the detail, and then I'll come back with a u-gouge that's larger to remove material. And a lot of people ask, how deep do you have to carve? And it's like, well, if you don't want to, your brayer is pretty flat, but it's a little soft. And the deeper you go, the less likely you're going to get ink there. So if you don't want ink or chatter, remove it. But some people like the chatter, and so it's all kind of what you want to go for. And so those are the u-gouges. We're going to move on and take a look at the v-gouge now. So our v-gouge is very similar. It's kind of a mix between a u-gouge and a knife, right? Because it's kind of got two different knives coming down to one point. With the v-gouge, you can get really, really detailed line work, right? And again, you can go and make lots of curves. If you press harder, it's going to go in farther. If you press softer, it's going to float on the surface. And so there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with a v-gouge. Sometimes I just use it if I have the inside corner of a shape, like an acute corner, and I want to carve it out. But you can see the u-gouges, we're making larger marks based on how big your u-gouge is. And then the v-gouge, it's like how far do you press the tool into the wood, and you can get different thicknesses. And again, you can see that I'm making curves and things with the v-gouge. So v-gouge does lots of line work or acute inside corners. It's kind of annoying to sharpen. Okay, so I'm going to do a little actual carving of this block. And so I like to pick out my tool for what I'm doing. And in this case, let's say I'm going to remove this strip here. So I don't need to be careful because I already kind of cut along that border earlier, right? So I did that just a second ago with that u-gouge, right? So I'm just going to remove this outer. And I'm going to do that with this nice large u-gouge, which you may or may not have. And if you don't have it, then you're, oh, maybe not that one. We'll see if this one is a little bit sharper. That one needs to also visit the sharpening table. And so sometimes I like to start away from myself. Yeah, that's great. I'm pushing away from myself. You can see with the larger u-gouge, I'm just letting it fall right off the edge of the block, right into that bench hook there. And I'm working my way back. And that's kind of nice because I'm removing material and giving myself a void to fall into with the tool. And now you can see that area is gone. And sometimes I like to go in along that previously carved spot and take away a little bit more material to clarify my line, but not recarve the line. And so there we go. Another thing to be using is a piece of leather. And so this is just a honing block. And I've got a little bit of polishing compound on there on top of leather. And it's the same thing with a leather strop at a barber shop. In this case, it's a big u-gouge. So I'm twisting it as I go. I'm not actually cutting the leather, and you shouldn't be ever cutting the leather, though it does happen from time to time. But I'm trying to pull the blade across, and in some ways it's nice too. I've got a rounded edge on the edge of this piece of leather here, so I can actually softly go and take care of the inside of that tool as well. And then come back, and you're polishing it, and you'll feel a difference when you go back to your block to carve more away. And so I'm on the other side, and wow, that does noticeably feel a lot better. And I'm gonna work my way, so I'm gonna sneak my way up to that line, but I'm not gonna start by carving that line with such a big tool. And so, working my way up, I'm getting closer, but I'm not carving the line yet. And so you can see with the big u-gouge, I got up close to that line, but I didn't use the u-gouge to actually carve it. And so I'm going to come in with this nice knife here. And so this is a little bit more slender and easier to break too when it's slender. than ones you'll get in a starter kit. But that's because I got a nicer tool and then I sharpened it this way. And you can also, if you catch that glimmer on the end of it, I'll talk about sharpening in a different video, but this one has a micro bevel right there on the end, which is that bright line of the tool. So anyways, I am also going to start by coming over to the leather. And again, I'm never cutting the leather while I'm using it. I'm going to pull my knife across on one side like so, and then I'm going to flip it and do the other side. And so this is, again, helping to polish and sharpen your tool. And it's an important thing to do from time to time, and it really helps to strengthen your tool, and it makes it so you don't have to sharpen it as often. And you get a better image as well, because you have sharper tools and you have a better experience, so it's helpful. Okay, so now I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to go along the edge here, and one of the things that I'm going to do is keep the bevel towards the material that I'm trying to keep, which in this case is that dark line, that border there. I'm also going to kind of put the tool in at an angle so that I'm kind of creating a ramp up to the material that I want to keep. And so, and you also notice that it's peeling away from me right there. And now I'm going to move my hand so I don't cut myself, because this is a tool that I'm pulling towards myself. Well, a little sloppy there, but now you can see that edge has been cut and it's actually peeling away. It's, you know, it's chipping away from the material that I want to keep. And that's because basically by using the large u-gouge to create that void on the side there, I gave a place for that wood to fall into. And when you don't have that area for the wood to fall into, sometimes it wants to push in. So now I'm going to come along here. I'm going to use my chisel, and I'm going to keep the bevel down towards the wood that I want to keep, and I'm going to follow that line that I did to kind of remove the rest of it. And so, and you know, you'll find that the chisel and knife are used in tandem very often. And it's a little bit more of an advanced carving technique, so feel free to just use that u-gouge and draw like I was saying. But here I was able to get a really nice straight edge on my border, and that's something I wanted to keep. And so I'm going to be using that in the inside as well. And so now I'm going to start looking at carving the rest of this, and immediately I am drawn towards carving that big void up top. I think I just want to tackle that right away, and then I'll work my way into some of this other detail. And so again, maybe starting with a larger u-gouge in the middle. It's easy to enter the wood. It's harder to exit. So when I have a border, I have to make sure that I'm able to not just go straight through the edge of it. And so I want to be mindful of when I'm carving towards what I want to keep, to be very careful. And so by giving myself this big void, I gave myself an area to carve into. So I'm going to flip the block around, and now I'm going to carve into that. And it just gives a place for my tool to land and end in. This is one of my larger u-gouges. Again, if you're only using a medium-sized u-gouge, I could be doing all of the same work with a medium-sized u-gouge. And in fact, these are, well, one is, I guess, significantly bigger than the other. But, you know, they're not that far off. I'm going to use the leather with these cheaper tools, too, and we're going to see what condition these guys are in. Oh, those are nice. This is great. Yeah. And so some of this detail, again, I'm getting up. I went down in size with the tool because I'm getting closer to doing a little bit more detail. But if you look at this, I'm not actually carving the line that I want to carve yet. And so this is a more traditional approach where you kind of remove your negative space first and then you start zeroing in on your detail. Sometimes I work in the opposite, where I do all my detail work first and I go back and remove the negative material. So it's kind of, you know, there's a lot of approaches to this, and as long as you're not like stabbing yourself or breaking your tools all the time, I like to think that there's not necessarily a wrong way, you know. There's just different ways of doing things. And so, and you got to be careful sometimes, especially when you're going, you see like that wanted to keep peeling. So one thing that you can do, like I have some material down here that I want to keep, right? So I don't want that wood veneer to be able to make it and peel up over there. So I'm going to give myself a line to just stop. And so that means I won't be able, I could blow through it, but it's giving me a zone to end at. And so that my carving doesn't go past that. So that's kind of a nice trick to do in different times. And so, again, if there is, like in this case, I have this line along the top that I want to keep. So I'll strengthen that really quick for us so we can. So that's a line that I really want to keep, right? And you could go along it with the u-gouge like I was doing earlier, but you have a little bit of less control when you do that. So I'm going to sneak up to the line, get close with the u-gouge, but then I'm going to come back with my knife. And you can hold your knife in two different ways. Before I was kind of holding it like a pencil. I get a little bit more control in some ways, but another way is the stabby way of carving. And so here I'm putting, and another thing to keep in mind about the knife is you're really just putting the tip of the knife into the wood. You're not slicing or bringing that along. So you're concentrating your pressure with just the tip penetrating the wood. And so I'm going to go ahead and with the stabby way of carving, maybe I can move this camera. So we're going to see if this angle's any better. And so there's two ways. You can hold a knife like a pencil. Same thing with the u-gouge. You can hold your u-gouge like a pencil. Once you start cutting your u-gouges down, you can have them fit into your hand in a few different manners, and that's what's nice of having about them short. For my larger u-gouge here, I was actually holding it with two hands, and so just so I have one hand in the palm of my hand and the other one's controlling it, and you can really get a lot of force and remove a lot of wood quite quickly by doing it this way. And so I don't have a ton of wood to remove on this block, so I can't go very far, but it can be very helpful. And so different ways to hold your tools. And getting back to the knife, so what I did earlier, right, is I removed the majority of the wood in this void up top, and now I'm going to use the stabby way of carving with the knife here, and I'm going to pull it towards myself, and I'm really just pushing the tip in, and you kind of grip with your pinky and forefinger, and then you can kind of control it up top and use, and that's the theory. I pretty much just grip it and pull it around, Maybe that's why I don't have quite as much control. So what I want to show you now is because I created that void, let's see if we can actually get that on camera. Because I created the void here, when I brought that knife over, it just fell right off into the void there. And so that's what's nice. If you're going to do really small line work, you need to be carving away the negative space before you start actually sneaking up to your line, because you need that negative void for material to fall into. And so the nice thing about the knife is I really made a really strong definition with that line. And now I'm going to follow along with a chisel to remove that excess material. And the idea with the chisel is one side of your chisel is following that line you made, and the other side of the chisel is free and penetrating the wood. And I'm going to talk about that a little more in just a second. So by flipping your block over, you can do some little practice things. And one thing to practice can be really helpful is with the knife. And so there's a couple ways to make a line. One is to use, here I've got a v-gouge right here, right? And so you could, and I'm talking about negative line, so I'm carving away the line. A v-gouge just makes a nice line right there, However, either side of the v-gouge are locked in together. And so another way to make a knife it takes twice as long because it's 2 cuts, is with your knife. And so make 1 cut, flip it over, you know, and follow along where you just went. And so, and I kind of, oh, let's pretend this is perfect. It wasn't quite perfect. I had to go back through that line to make it a little deeper. You know, what I like about knife line is that it's kind of uneven because both of those lines were drawn separately, where the v-gouge is very uniform and both of those lines are totally parallel. So it's kind of fun to have a little bit more variety. One thing you'll notice as you use your knife, and again, I have a general rule keeping the bevel towards the material that you want to keep, but here a burr is created on one side, and that is normally the side that does not have a bevel. And the reason there is a bevel is to kind of round over your corner and going up to the material that you want to keep, and it strengthens it. So this, when I carved this here, I kind of had it at an angle, and so the side that was angled under the wood started coming up, and that's called an undercut, and so that's something you want to avoid. So we're always trying with, if you're looking at the edge of the board, like what I was just trying to describe is, if this here was material that we were trying to keep, like we're not going to carve the surface there and we're carving out over here, so we're removing this material over here. You want to have an angle going up to the material that you want to keep. And that angle is actually rather important. If it's a straight line, your wood will start to splinter out. And of course, if you undercut the material trying to keep, so it goes underneath, you're not going to get a good strong line on the edge of your image. So when you use the u-gouge, you don't really have to think about that. That's really just when you're using your knife. And so I like to practice on the back side of my block for some things, and one of the things is using the knife and chisel. And so the idea with the knife and chisel is my knife just kind of created a line coming down into the wood, right? And the chisel is trying to follow that line you made and actually come out of the wood. And so one side of the chisel is following the line and the other side is coming out of the wood. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I'm used to being able to do this in person. And so now I have this nice line that I drew with the knife, and I'll do that one more time. The thing that's important is making sure that this line is nice and deep. So another cut right there, nice and deep. And then I'm going to follow, like I was saying, one side of the chisel is going to follow the line that we just made with the knife. The other side of the chisel is going to break through the surface of the wood. Unlike a u-gouge, if you just try to carve with it, it doesn't work. It just starts splintering, right? The u-gouge is magical because the smile or the curve of the tool is able to cut through the surface of the wood on either side. So you're always cutting what you're removing. Chisel doesn't have that. It's just straight. So again, I'm going to follow that line, and got a little loss there. So I'm going to do that one more time because it wasn't, I drifted a little too far away, and this chisel's not quite big enough, though it did work. So we're going to try that one more time, and this is why you practice on a practice block, right? I'm just going to draw a line just straight towards myself. One side of the chisel is going to follow that line. The other side is going to break the surface of the wood. So I'm going to bring that up here and try to show you what I was able to do. Is one side of the chisel is following the line that I made. The other one's breaking the surface of the wood. And so in this way, you can really control the material that you're removing and what you want to keep with the knife. And so knife and chisel, very helpful tools. This is a more advanced way to carve. And so don't try to jump into that right away. And if you're going to try it, make sure to try it on a back of your block, and make sure you can do a straight line first because curved lines are that much harder. And so start with the curved line. And now I'm back to my image here, right? And so I haven't totally smeared it yet, which is good because it's just drawn in pencil, right? So now I'm going to go in with my u-gouge and start working out all this little detail. And again, I'm picking different tools, different size tools for different things. If I have a larger hole, well, get a larger tool to make that hole. And you just keep slowly removing material. And try not to cut yourself. So there's a lot of tricks to carving, and those are all things that you'll pick up over time. I'm a really big proponent of learn by doing. So experiment and try different ways of approaching things, and try to get a good habit of using your leather. That will really help long term, and try not to cut yourself. So good luck.